And that's what we saw with our distance learning. It was not easy for any of us at first. I'm sure that many of you would agree, but as we practiced and got better and got feedback, it improved. So set the bar low and then just keep moving it up little by little.
Today, our pearler is Lauren Mehrbach, who's currently the middle school principal at Singapore American School. She's also served as a high school principal at the American Cooperative School in Tunis and high school deputy principal also at Singapore American School. She's a graduate herself of the PTC way back in 1997, I think it was, Lauren. And she's been co-facilitating our assessment leadership course for the PTC for quite a while. And I just want to add that Lauren and I do go way back when we served together in Venezuela. Lauren, over to you.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's 10 o'clock in Singapore, past my bedtime for most of you who know me. You'll know that I'm up very late. Bambi had asked us all to do this, and I've been thinking through, and what I decided to talk about today was setting the bar low. And when I shared that title with Bambi, she thought, that's an unusual way to think of things. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about setting the bar low and what I mean by that. I'm going to share my screen, and we will begin. Let me just move this out of the way. We all know so setting the bar low. So what do I mean by that? First, when we think about this, we think about, okay, well, that's going to lead to a lot of mediocrity. That's going to make people feel like, wow, that's so low, I can do anything. I'm not going to really have to work very hard. Or you might think that, like this one, right? We're going to make ourselves feel good if we set the bar low. But I'm not really talking about setting the bar low in terms of the goal. We're talking about really clear, ambitious targets, big, lofty goals, but looking at how do you do that? And I think back on a couple of years ago, I was turning 51 and my son was 15. It was one of those, our ages were opposite numbers there. And I was just getting ready to run a half marathon, and I asked him to join me. And of course, I set the target of running it, and I was, of course, wanted to beat him. And so I set it out, and I did all of I set the first couple of weeks, you're running this amount of time, and then you add things, and you add, and you add, and you get, you progressively better, and you set your target, you have this goal, you have a time in mind. But you're starting out really slow because you need to be able to build the skills and the endurance to be able to do the run. My 15-year-old son, I think in the 3 months that I was training, did one 5K run before the race. And of course, you can't really fight genetics and age, so he still beat me. But here's the thing, is that the next day I was able to go on a hike and he could barely get up and down the stairs because he wasn't really able to maintain it, right? And so when we think about when we set bars low for our change in schools, you're thinking about why would we do that, right? You want to set a lofty goal, but you also have a lot of really hardworking professionals who don't like to fail. They don't want to feel defeated by failure. They don't want to feel like they can't do it. And you want to make sure you're also showing that learning is not about only the performance. It's about that process. It's about that learning process that we go through. And you need to model that and really model using the feedback that you get and changing as you go. And so one of the things we talk about a lot is that this is really what learning looks like, right? It's not a direct line. It's not, you are going to go up and you're going to hit a wall and you're going to have to backtrack and you're going to have to really try again. So this is what we think about when we think about learning. And so we know that we're going to have to figure out one way to do something and then backtrack or figure out a new way and add to it to get there. So I thought I'd give two examples of how in kind of my recent work, I've figured out setting the bar low. And in the first example, I don't think I really thought I don't think I thought about it actively as a symbol of setting a low bar. But in the second one, I actually stepped over a bar on in the faculty meeting to show how low I wanted them to set it. And I'll explain why. So the first one is kind of this really strategic, planned second order change. We were going to reinvent our middle school in these flexible learning communities with really integrated teaching teams, co-teaching, interdisciplinary units, really giving a lot more choice to kids. And we were going to change our thinking about the use of time, that from the teacher's time to the kids' learning time, and that they got to choose how much time they use, like really, really hard change work. The other one was what we all just went through, that transition from distance learning, well, from in class to distance learning, which was really a crisis response, right? It was reactive. None of us went into this job to teach via Zoom. This was not what anybody knew how to do well. And it was really, for all of us, a crisis response mode. So the framework that I tend to use with my teams is this idea of the Kmo Framework, though the M really goes first. It's from Clark and Estes, the turning research into results, and kind of looking at why are we doing this? What do we need to know to be able to do this, and what might get in our way, and then how can we address that? So if you take, for example, that flexible learning goals, this is kind of the thinking we went through to think about what we needed to do that work. So that motivation, you need to create the sense of urgency, right? So you with the learning communities, we looked at different kinds of data. We looked at kind of all of the future thought thinkers that are out there. Hate to say that 21st century skill phrase because we're 20% into that century, but those things where we were looking at all of the kind of thought leaders in the field, what we needed to be doing. And then when you look at the distance learning, what was the sense of urgency? We needed to keep school open. We had an obligation to these students and their families, and we needed to create some sense of normalcy. And we also really wanted to be able to model that we were problem solvers and flexible. So on that first one, you can see those blue bars. We did some student interviews over the, live interviews, over 150 interviews. And we kind of then coded the answers to see what kinds of things they thought made a good learner. And you can see we had lots of kids talking about compliance and attention. And then over the course of 3 years, that work that we started to do. So when teachers saw that, and when they saw the interviews that were like, oh, what makes a good learner? You do your homework and you pay attention to the teacher. Our teachers were horrified because that's not what they want their kids to think. So they had now a motivation to do this work. And of course, this was our motivation to do the other work, that other big change. And then, so we set some goals, right? We set some goals. We wanted to move our kids into, when they described what made a good learner or a good thinker, that they started to give some of the answers that we would hope they would give. We really gathered some baseline data, and we looked at our internal and external assessments. And again, with the distance learning, we wanted to establish what was the goal. We wanted to keep the kids as close on track as we could. We wanted to keep them engaged. We wanted to keep some element of community and fun, right? Those were the things we wanted to do. Then we needed to figure out how to do it. And here's where the low bar comes in. What are the low risk ways we can start practicing that? Right? Things that we can do. This first example, we had all of our teams look at all of these different strategies, and we, kind of made a competition with our teams if they could get a bingo board of just trying some of these new activities. And then with our distance learning, we were getting the idea that it was going to happen. So what was the first thing we did? We did an advisory lesson at night from home, just to make sure that all of our teachers could now at least do this first thing where they felt comfortable doing the Zoom meeting, right? Very low bar, just have a 10-minute advisory lesson on Thursday night. And that was what we did, right? Very low bar. We also looked at what we could do to help support it. And most importantly, we kept getting feedback and then publicly acting on it. And this is that whole idea of modeling formative feedback, right? Making sure you get the feedback and then you act on the feedback, right? So for example, in our new communities, we had, you can see here, there was about 19% of the students in the community who were still saying that they were very distracted by noise. So we then shared this with our parents and our students and our teachers. And that summer we put in new sound panels that were going to help to diminish that. We were showing them that we were acting on it and we were learning from what we were doing. Same thing with our distance learning. This was something that went to our teachers, right? And then we got some, each week we were just trying to make sure that we were showing them that, okay, you tried this. Okay, we're gonna now make it better. We're gonna up the bar because we're gonna fix some of these things. We're gonna respond to it, and then we're gonna make it better for you and for the kids. So in summary, when you're trying to make a change, whether it's a big institutional change that's kind of strategic and planned, or the kind that we all recently made, the feedback that we've gotten by setting those low targets is that it helps people feel secure. It helps them feel safe. It helps them feel like they can try it without it being very high risk. Because we know people don't like to completely fail. And if it's a small thing, then oh, okay, I can fix that. And then, okay, oh, and our leaders are showing us that they know that it didn't work, but that's okay. And that now they're gonna help us do this other thing. So summarize anything you're learning, both successes and failures, act on it publicly, and just continually get that feedback and continually modeling that way of setting the bar and then adding the next level and then adding the next level. And then, eventually, I think about, when you think about pole vaulters, right? They don't start up way high, right? They start at the bottom, and then as they practice, they get better and better and better. And that's what we're seeing with our teams, and that's what we saw with our distance learning. It was not easy for any of us at first. I'm sure that many of you would agree, but as we practiced and got better and got feedback, it improved. So set the bar low and then just keep moving it up little by little. That's my pearl.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you for sharing, those really good examples of, current thinking and current things. We had recently, I see Lee is on the call with us, Lee telling us that we need to learn by doing and not always being relying on yep. What the gurus out there are saying. And so the model that you're presenting, or the idea that you're presenting, does some of both of those. And so that's a really helpful example. So you've been a principal a while, for many years now, and you've had a few different school experiences. So just, we have a couple of questions coming in, but I'm just inventing one right now for you because I want to know. And I see other people on the call here. Melissa Schwab is on the call with us, and Melissa shares a course with Lauren. So Melissa, we might unmute you for 2 seconds in a minute if you have. I can see you're kind of dying to say something here, so we may let you do that in a moment. Now, I wanted to just kind of frame it this way: is that one of the models that we teach in several of our PTC courses is the notion that as a principal, you were always going to have proactive and reactive things that are going to be in the mix, and it's not difficult to identify the reactive ones. Right. The government said we can't be going to school. Okay, we have to react to that. So it automatically throws it into what kind of a decision-making model can we use, or an improvement model. The other part, the proactive part, which is what we hope that sort of 90% of the work will be, and it's not going to be constantly, putting out fires. Maybe you could talk a little bit more to how do you identify what are the proactive things that you should be working on? I think this is such a great example that and I know you've shared this a couple of other times with us, that the kids thought that going to school was about compliance. I just think that's such a powerful understanding. And I think I challenge everybody on this call to go back to their kids and ask them, what is it that you think school's all about? And if you get what Lauren got, it's probably going to be worse in your school, believe me, because I know the first time I tried it, it's like, oh, we thought we were doing all these fancy things. And now what we see is that basically just kids are coming to school thinking, as long as I just do what the teacher tells me, then that's what learning's about. So how do you identify those proactive things?
Well, first, Leslie Tate is also on this call,
Yeah.
and she was the woman who we did those interviews together in when we were in Tunisia. So I thank her for that.
And it's Leslie's birthday today. Happy birthday,
I
Leslie.
know, and it's Canada Day, but not that Leslie. Happy New Zealand. I don't know. I wish I could see your face, Leslie. I can't right now. There's so many people. I think when we think about, you know, I'm very much, I need a clear vision and strategic direction for the school, which is never individually set. You know, that's a school-wide thing, and a community builds that. So I think for when in trying to figure out what those strategic priorities are and how to then kind of back it up so that you're setting those bars and building towards whatever that vision is. I think that trying to find, and I don't know that I mean, obviously, if you're publicly talking about the things you don't do well all the time, it means that you know that you're never going to do it right the first time. But trying to make sure that you look at the one that's going to give you the biggest impact for kids the soonest, because when our parents and our teachers see that, it's very motivating, right? When they can see a difference in an attitude or in a depth of understanding or in problem solving in a kid, then they start to believe in the direction, and then you get more energy towards it, I think, from the community.
Yeah, we have that's you know, anything visible, right? That you can
Right.
actually see the tangible results. Sort of a related question here that's coming in. How do you keep the motivation going if feedback looks disappointing? When do you know when to scrap something and move on versus when to buy soundproofing? You know, like, if anybody has the magic bullet on that one, sign me up.
I was going to say, yeah, that's, you know, I think the thing that I think is tough in our schools is we have turnover, and, you know, some schools have really significant turnover, others have little, but it's still, you have turnover in families and you have turnover in your faculty. And so you never really get to give up on kind of, like, you know, we have to, we've been doing standards-based grading for almost a decade, but we still have to educate our parents every year, right? And so I think they're the ones that you know that you're never going, that you know are best for kids, you know it helps learning, that you're just not going to give up on. And then there are the ones where, okay, you know, that schedule isn't working. We have tried it, we've modified it. It's not getting the traction we thought, it's not doing it, and now I need to give up, right? I need to say, okay, we've gone into that nook in the maze way too many times. I keep hitting the wall. We're going to go back and start again and see if we can do another path to see if we can get this timetable working. So I think it is a bit of both.
Yeah, and we have lots of people reacting to this whole notion of feedback. Let me just read a couple of them to you, and we'll see if we can put them together. Scott, especially, like, that you've been so helpful in proposing questions and giving feedback. Can you speak to the challenge of feedback processes being perceived as feeling helpful when morale is low due to external factors? Let me read a couple of others. What happens if the feedback loop shows you that you've been making mistakes? How would you address that with parents, faculty, and students? You know, and how do you build a culture around, you know, the whole idea that you're asking people's opinions about things or their reaction to it, and, you know, external forces, it's not going so well.
Right. I mean, I think there's different kinds of feedback, right? That's the feedback that is going to be the opinions, and I think that's where you really need to look at what people are saying. You know, I know when many of us get that sort of feedback, we focus on the negative. You know, we can get ourselves buried in the 12 comments that were really negative and ignore the 88% that wasn't, right? When that happens. But when you really do, you just, like, it's super hard. If you can fix it, if there's a way to say, okay, you know, we blew this didn't work. We're going to need to do it again. We're sorry we wasted your time. We sorry, hopefully you don't get too far down into something before you start to get that feedback. And that's why I think that the regularly asking, getting the groups of kids together and asking them questions, not all surveys, right? Sometimes bringing in focus groups so that you're regularly getting it, so you don't get too far off track to have to like scrap something that you've invested years into, or huge amounts of money into. And the more you do it, the more likely people are to be honest quickly, so that you can spot those hot spots before they become kind of fires.
Yeah, and we have lots of commenting. Jamie is contributing, reminding us about how much appreciative inquiry, the process of appreciative inquiry can be helpful. We do have helpful processes. I'm just thinking also that the whole notion that if the reactive things rely to a very large degree, how successful you're going to be in the reactive depends on the proactive, in terms of the culture that you've built around, and the currency and the capital that you've built up around when we do get something we have to react to. We have some predictability and some comfort in knowing that the people who are leading these processes, that we can rely on them, so the reliability of good judgment, I would add in, is something that you build through the proactive processes,
Absolutely.
Which then you can then rely on when you are in one of those extenuating circumstances kinds of things. We have some wonderful other questions. We don't have time for those. We will put those into our resource for you. Lauren, thank you so much. I can see from all the comments.
Thank you, everybody.
People are really grateful for your comments this morning, for your pearl.